So let's build a custom pipe. And I want to build a pipe that again formats these temperature values, but also these temperature values. To be precise, I want to build a custom pipe that can be used for outputting these values as temperature values by adding the appropriate symbol in degrees Celsius or degrees Fahrenheit. And in addition, the pipe should also be able to convert values from Celsius to Fahrenheit and vice versa. So it will do two things: convert the values that are being output and also add a fitting temperature symbol for Celsius or Fahrenheit. And therefore, to add a new pipe, I'll add a new file. We could also use the CLI, but again, I'll do that manually here for this first pipe. And I'll add a temperature pipe TS file. As always, we have a name that describes what this thing is about. Then we describe what kind of Angular feature we're using or building, and then .ts since we're using TypeScript, of course. Well, and then in there, a pipe is also just a class, just like components or directives. It's a class which I want to export to make it available outside of this file. And then I'll name it temperature pipe. Now, this class should then, as a next step, be decorated with the pipe decorator. Just as we used component for components and directive for directives, we use the pipe decorator to turn a class into a pipe. And just as all these other decorators, this pipe decorator takes a configuration object where we can, for example, give this pipe a name. And indeed, we must give this pipe a name. This is not optional. We need a name because it's that name by which we'll use that pipe in a template thereafter. And here I'll use temp as a name, but of course it is up to you. I'll then also set this to be a standalone pipe. The alternative would be to not make it standalone and instead use ng modules, just as we did it with components earlier in this course. But here I'll use standalone, as I've always done it for all the components and all the directives in the previous sections. So that's then a basic pipe which we could use, but this pipe wouldn't do anything and wouldn't actually work. Because all those pipe classes need one very specific method, a transform method. And it's this transform method that will be executed automatically by Angular when you use this pipe we're building here in a template. And the value after which you use that pipe will be passed as an argument to this transform method. But we'll see this in action soon. And since this is required, and to make sure that you have the right method signature, that you accept the right arguments, and you have no typo in that method name, since all that matters, Angular gives us an interface which we can implement into this pipe class. The pipe transform interface, which is imported from @AngularCore, which simply forces me to add a transform method written like that, which accepts a value as a first argument and then any number of additional arguments thereafter. And we'll tweak the value and the additional arguments in just a second. But this is a method that must exist in such a pipe class for that pipe to work. And this transform method then also must return something. It must return the transformed value, which will then in the end be output on the screen. So in its simplest form, we can simply return the value as we get it without changing it. Or to see that something has changed, we could add -transformed thereafter, like this. So I'm taking any value and then I'm converting it to a string that has -transformed at the end of it. Well, and with that, we would have a first basic custom pipe, which doesn't do anything useful yet though, but we'll take care of that soon. For the moment, to use this pipe, we have to go to a template. in this case to the app component template, since this is the only one. And then here we can use it anywhere where we're outputting dynamic content. So for example, here, instead of using the number pipe, instead of doing that, we could use the temp pipe we just created. But as always, Angular wouldn't know it, so to unlock it, we have to go to the app component TypeScript file and add our temperature pipe here to the imports, and also add this import at the top. And with that, the temp pipe is unlocked, and if you now save everything, you will see dash transformed here for this first value, and that proves that our pipe is working. Now it's time to make it actually useful. To make this temperature pipe here useful, we should start by defining which kind of values we want to accept, because pipes can operate on any kinds of values. Here in this example, I have some numbers, but we could also operate on string values, on objects, on arrays, anything. For example, the date pipe here operates on a date value. The current date is not a string. Instead, it is an object of type date. So you can accept any kind of value, and it of course depends on what your pipe should do, which kind of values you want to accept. Here, for example, I want to accept values of type string or number. So a union type of these two types, so that we can use this pipe on any string or number value. And then we could also add some configuration arguments, but I'll do that as a second step, as a next step. For a start, I'll instead just accept that value. So this pipe can't be configured yet. It just takes the value after which it's used, because that is what this value here is. It is the value after which the pipe is used. So the value for the temp pipe is this properties value here. And then here I'll simply assume that I get a value in Celsius that should be converted to Fahrenheit. So therefore I'll add a val helper variable, which should be a number. And I'll then check if the type of value is string. And that is standard JavaScript, by the way, has nothing to do with TypeScript. And if it is a string, I'll set val equal to parse float value, so that I convert the input value, which is a string, to a number. Else I'll set val to value because it already is a number. Then as a next step, I want to convert from Celsius to Fahrenheit. So I'll create my output temperature, which is val times 9 divided by 5 plus 32. That's the formula for converting a value from Celsius to Fahrenheit. And then I want to output this, and therefore I'll output a template literal string created with backticks here. So these are not single quotes. These are backtick characters, which are special characters on your keyboard. And here I'll output temperature, then a blank, and then degrees Fahrenheit here. And that's then my finished transformation code for transforming a string or number value to a string that displays the temperature in Fahrenheit. So with that, if we use temp after a value, if we save everything and we go back, we can see that this pipe is doing its job and is showing us this value as Fahrenheit. Now we got a lot of decimal places again, but I'll take care of that later. For the moment, it's just important to note that this works. But now let's make this pipe a bit more powerful and let's make it configurable, therefore.